What's up? It's the Master Man here, and today I want to talk about Manowar. Manowar is a prominent hero in the Valiant universe, and he's been compared to Valiant's Superman, not necessarily in terms of power, but in kind of how he acts and represents, and we'll get into that a little bit more. In reality, his powers make him sort of a fusion of Venom and Iron Man, as he possesses the Manowar armor, which he has a symbiotic and maybe a little parasitic relationship with, especially if we're talking about the rebooted version. That being said, his rebooted version does have quite a few differences from his original run from 1992, but I do want to touch on that version because I actually think that version of Manowar holds up quite well, and I recommend anyone who's into more mature action comics check out the Manowar Omnibus for his 1992 through 1996 run, because it's actually a pretty fun read. But who is Manowar? Exo is a man known as Aric of Dacia. He is a Visigoth from the era of the rise of the Roman Empire, and his whole clan basically existed to fight the Romans and protect their land, as the Romans only wanted to conquer and take what was theirs. This is true in both the original and the reboot, though in the original, we actually get what I would say is a lot deeper motivation for why Aric hates the Romans. As we see on the page, the Romans take his father's life in quite brutal fashion, and as a young child, Aric gets revenge for his father's killer. The story actually gave me vibes of early Berserk, and I feel like if you know, you know. If you like those early tales and how dark they can get, again, I think you'll find something to like here in Manowar. After taking revenge for his father, Aric grows up on the battlefield and he becomes quite a prolific fighter, taking out hundreds of Romans as he ages, though his clan is always on the back foot. Aric eventually stumbles upon a group of spider aliens who he believes are demons, and he rushes to attack them. These spider aliens manage to overpower and capture Aric and some of his people and take them off planet to work as slaves for their empire. In the original run, Exo is given his chance to escape when Solar, Man of the Atom, another Valiant superhero, attacks the spider alien fleet, giving Aric the chance to launch his own coup. And we actually see Aric take out a few of the spider aliens with no shirt or no pants to his name. One of the things I like about the original version is they make it very clear that Aric is a prolific fighter. Not to say that in the reboot he's a bad fighter, but he does tend to get bested by a lot of characters in close quarter combat in the reboot, whereas in the original version, Aric is undoubtedly more impressive, taking out multiple spider aliens with almost no weapons while staring down the barrel of laser blasters. In the original version, Aric stumbles upon the armor almost as a complete accident, and he finds the power ring that allows him to control the armor, and he calls the armor his good skin, and he mentions that it can protect him from firelight, which refers to the laser blasters the aliens use. Using the armor, he's able to defeat the aliens with ease and escape back to Earth. However, due to time dilation, he is now a man out of time, and he has to adjust to living in the 20th century. And this is about where I want to end talking about the original Aric of Dacia, though we will come back to this when I want to talk about the armor in a bit more detail, as there are some differences between the original and the rebooted version. The rebooted version of Aric of Dacia is quite similar, though we do come into his story a bit later in life. His war with the Romans is already well underway, and while Aric is depicted as one of the best soldiers on the battlefield, he's also shown to be just a little bit more ignorant in this version of the story, in my opinion. He pushes his men to fight battles they can't win simply because he's confident in his own abilities. And even when he does come across the alien race known as Divine in the rebooted version, he pushes them in to attack their clearly superior weaponry. I feel like it was more understandable for him to push the attack on what he thought were demons, but in this one, Divine are clearly set out to look more like armored soldiers with unfamiliar weapons, so Aric pushing his men to set upon them does come off as a little bit more foolhardy. But the story there progresses much the same. He's taken to Divine's home planet and forced to be a slave for many years. He is still shown to be somewhat skilled, as he does manage to kill a vine early on, using only his restraints as a weapon, but it'd be several years before he's able to make his full escape. The Manowar armor in the reboot is known as the armor of Shenhara, and the Vine believe it was birthed on their planet. However, we will later find out that's not quite true. It's shown that the armor only picks someone worthy, and every Vine who's tried to wear the armor in the past has been killed by it. Aric does manage to get a glimpse of seeing an alien try to wear the armor, and that's where he comes to know that the armor is their strongest weapon, and it's in that moment that he makes plans to take it for himself. A few years pass, and Aric becomes more and more jaded to his circumstances, and even manages to lose one of his hands when he defies their captors. He eventually makes plans to launch an escape, where he lures in one of the Vine soldiers and manages to take their spear for his own. The Vine spears have enough power to cut through even their own armor, so Aric uses his superior skills to kill several Vines and arm the remaining slaves as they head to the armory of Shenhara in order to capture the armor for himself. They're actually met with a strong number of Vine forces, but Aric manages to lead the charge and get the upper hand on those forces, though at the cost of some of the lives of the slaves. They do make it to the armory, and Aric is able to don the armor, and at first it seems like the armor has not chosen him as he falls to the floor as the previous Vines did, but he does manage to recover and stand, is able to use the full power of the armor to resist the coup and launch his escape. The armor is massively durable and contains tons of firepower, including the ability to spawn wrist-mounted missiles with incredible destructive force. And we see that Exo Manowar is literally a one-man army, taking out hundreds of Vine soldiers by himself. One of the Vine soldiers eventually manages to place 2 extremely powerful explosives directly onto his chest, and that explosion launches him into the vacuum of space. In Aric's simple-mindedness, as he gets launched into the vacuum of space, his anger takes over and he can only think about blaming the Romans, and the armor responds to his desire by initiating interstellar travel back to Rome on Earth. When Aric gets there, he finds himself in the 21st century in the actual city of Rome, and he's now truly a man out of time. This is because of the time dilation associated with faster than light travel. So while I believe only 6 years passed for Aric, it was something like 16th centuries for Earth. And this is kind of where the parallels for Superman come into play. As kind of similar to Superman, he feels kind of alien on his own planet, and by all intents and purposes, he has lost his own people. Most of the men he knew are long dead, and the Visigoths are not even remembered to time. Aric finds himself confronted by basically all military forces that Earth has to offer, and none of them can quite measure up to his armor. And this level of power in the Valiant universe is pretty rare, which is why I think the callbacks to Superman come up with this character as well. However, it should be noted there are quite a few Valiant characters who are stronger than Aric in terms of sheer power, so he's not Superman in that sense. Even Solar, Man of the Atom, still exists in this universe, I believe, and he outclasses Exo Manowar by quite a lot. Exo eventually makes roots on Earth, and after discovering the plantings, which are Vine's essentially sleeper agents that are made to look completely human, he eventually makes his way back to the Vine ship and brings his remaining people back home to Earth, and he creates the new Visigoth home in the United States under the watch of the US government. Aric takes his role as king of the Visigoth people, as most of them respect and worship his power as the one who controls the armor. Though of course his power is challenged several times throughout the run by his own people, which makes for some interesting story and character development. One of the things I like about this run is that Aric does change over time. He becomes wiser and less brash. He eventually learns how to prioritize the safety of his people over just mindless violence. So in that sense, making him start off as a bit of an airhead character who makes some silly decisions is paid off by seeing him grow as a person as the story progresses. And Aric becomes an integral part of the superhero community, eventually joining the Unity Squad, which is Valiant's version of the Avengers of the Justice League. Now let's talk about his armor for a bit and what makes him such a cool character. The Manowar armor is probably the strongest individual weapon in the Valiant universe. It is sentient and it is bonded to Aric, though that bond can be broken by someone with superior mental abilities, such as Livewire, who takes control of the armor at several points in the story, and she's even able to sever his connection to the armor, though this seems temporary, and it's debatable if the connection was ever fully severed, as she was convinced to return the armor to Aric, and there's an argument to be made the armor convinced her to do it. Now, the armor is massively durable, able to tank explosions from extremely close range, and any damage the armor does take it is able to repair itself in a matter of minutes, making it an extremely powerful weapon based on its durability alone. The armor can shoot deadly energy blast, which Aric makes frequent use of, as well as spawn rockets and other explosives, as I mentioned before. And in the reboot, one of its more prominent functions is the ability to make a plasma sword. The original Exo could spawn a sword as well, but it was more based out of the armor than the energy weapon Aric is able to manifest. And we learned from Livewire that the armor can make other constructs too, such as tendrils that can extend Livewire's abilities and allow her to hack things from a range. The armor also confers to its user a massive healing factor. It can heal essentially any fatal wound, with the more obvious instance of this being Aric's own hand, as it was cut off, as I mentioned before, and the armor was able to completely regrow it. However, there are caveats to this, though these will be considered more massive spoilers than the character summary, so if you want to clock out the video now and just start reading Exo for yourself, I suggest doing it here. But I do want to cover every facet of this armor because I find it quite cool. So, the Exo Manowar reboot demystified the armor quite a bit after the Armor Wars. We find out the armor is actually a parasitic alien species that can bond with most biological life, and it does this to grant power but also to self-replicate. And this is where we find also that Aric may not be as special as we once thought, because it does seem that the armor can and will bond with any mammal or animal type being, and it seems the main reason the armor killed the vine soldiers is because the vines are more plant than animal. It appears the armor cannot perform its replicating functions on that plant species. And what are these replicating functions I'm talking about? Well, that goes back to the armor's healing factor. In order to heal its user, the armor of Shinhara actually replaces any of your injured body parts with the armor technology, and it simply mimics human flesh. But on a deeper level, it is slowly turning the parts it heals into its own offspring. This is why in the Armor Wars, the armor is referred to as a virus, because it does act in a similar way. Once enough of your body is replaced by the armor, you yourself become an armor. The ultimate fate of Aric of Dacia, if he continues to get injured, is to become an armor himself. With the help of Livewire, Aric does eventually gain full control of the armor, meaning he can choose whether or not he wants to be healed by it. And as long as you don't get healed by the armor, you're at no risk of becoming one. So as long as he has minor injuries that he can heal naturally, he never has to worry about becoming an armor. And as I mentioned before, the armor grants vast durability and has its own self-replicating or self-repairing feature. So in theory, Aric could live quite a long life without ever becoming an armor himself. And since it's pretty clear you don't have to be chosen by the armor in that sense, he could give the armor up if it ever got to that point, before he fully turns. In the original Manowar comics, the armor is also made from other alien beings. Aric's first armor was made from a large alien we see get forcefully converted into the armor at the beginning of the series, and later towards the end of the series, Aric loses his first armor, and one of his companions takes the armor seed and converts himself into Aric's second Manowar armor. Towards the end of the current run of Exo Manowar, we do actually get to see the origin of Aric's own armor, as the armor was bestowed upon a little girl who was on her deathbed, and her injuries were so severe that the armor replaced essentially all of her, and by the time she awoke, she was only able to maintain a few days of consciousness before converting herself into the armor we know as the armor of Shinhara. And it was never born on the Vine's homeworld as they originally led you to believe. The armor does bond to its user, meaning that Exo has full control of the armor even remotely, and he's used this to some creative effects, such as forcing Livewire to turn against her own comrades when she stole the armor, in one of Aric's most impressive power feats. And the armor is quite powerful, as Aric was able to defeat the entire Unity squad essentially by himself, and while they were able to take the armor from him in the end, it can't really be said that it was an easy fight, and they were definitely on the back foot even though they had planned contingencies against the armor. It didn't go quite their way. The fact that Aric was even able to damage Harada, who's the most powerful telekinetic in the Valiant universe, just goes to show you how powerful he is with the armor. And it's even mentioned that Aric has above average reaction time, which allows him to go against telepaths like Harada, as he's able to attack them before they can really mount a counterattack. So the armor can replace entire organs and massive tissue damage. So what are its weaknesses? For one, Despond is a weakness because it can be overwritten. Again, Harbingers have a wide array of telepathic powers, and Technopathy is possessed by several, and any Technopath can eliminate Aric's connection to the armor, rendering it useless. We find out in Armor Hunters there are specific ways to kill armored users, one of which is using spears. In order for the armor to replace your organs, the obstruction has to be cleared, which is why spears are so effective at taking them out. If an armor user is speared in a fatal area and the spear isn't removed, they can't heal around the injury, which allows the Armor Hunters to kill the host. And if you kill the host, you kill the armor as well. There are also limits to the armor's durability. It's been shown that there are several alien weaponries that are able to pierce the armor as well, so simply having the armor doesn't make you the most powerful in the universe, which I think goes to show Aric's skill, as he's able and willing to take on Armor Hunters even with their experience in killing armored beings, and he's able to best them. Aric's other weakness is simply not being the best at close combat in his respective universe. He's been outmaneuvered by Ninjak several times, though Ninjak does tend to have to use tricks in order to get the upper hand on Aric, as even Ninjak acknowledges in open combat he's no match for the armor. The Eternal Warrior has also gotten the best of Aric in and out of his armor at separate occasions. As we come to find out, the Eternal Warrior is actually the one who trained Aric, and since he has several centuries of experience on Aric, it's not surprising to find that Aric still can't one-up his master in combat. Despite these shortcomings, Aric of Dacia often overcomes any struggles that's put in his path, and that makes this a compelling read over something like Superman, who constantly has to be nerfed in order to keep the stakes high. Aric of Dacia is an imperfect man who's trying his best and who never gives up in the face of confrontation, and watching him overcome the challenges of his world are what makes him a compelling superhero story. If you like sci-fi stories like Iron Man or even more of the spacefaring Venom tales, I think Exo Manowar is a story for you, as well as for anyone who likes brutal action comics. I recommend checking out this series. And don't be afraid to read the original run as well, because it still holds up in my opinion. And if you like this video, remember to leave it a like and subscribe, and thanks for tuning in.